Okay, here's part 2 of this week's Feedback Friday. Should I do the song? Okay, I'll do the song. It's Friday, Feedback Friday, the feedbackiest day of the week. Ha! And this is part 2, an article by Jody Allard. I'm done pretending men are safe, even my sons. Okay. If you want to dive in after that ludicrous headline, and that's sort of the purpose of this website is to create controversial prompts to discuss. You'll see the most read are defining LGBTQ LMNOP. My husband and I invited another man into our marriage and it's wonderful. My wife still can't accept that Trump won, and when your mother says she's fat. This is less intellectualism and more coffee talk. Again, framing. This is not attempting intellectualism, okay? These are raw nerve articles. So, this is why I want to juxtapose this, which is something of a garbage fire, compared to this Mike article, which is a complete goddamn garbage fire, and I think more potentially screwy up done youth of today than this. I consider this sadness fluff. It's not even sadness porn, it's sadness fluff. It is fluffy. It is I feel, not I think. And that's why I wanted to juxtapose these things. And I'm not even going to read the weepiness. You can. Too Long Didn't Read. This is a follow-up to an article in the Washington Post where a woman writer embarrassed the crap out of her sons. Especially one who then, if you read between the lines, kind of went MRA. Poetry. Like, just beautiful. But I actually found gems, like diamonds in the rough here. If you go past the blah, 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 my son. Who cares, right? I don't blame the kid. Ian Levincent actually talks quite eloquently about the dangers of bringing your family into your public writing. And I'm very careful about the things I bring my family into. You'll notice I refer to my husband as husband a lot of the time, not by his name, because trolls went after him when I won't take the bait. And that, that's not fair. I don't, my mother is my mother, my father is my father. I posted one picture of my mother once and trolls used it to call her old and ugly. And I can't do that anymore. It made me feel too awful. So I don't post pictures of my family. They haven't gone after my sister yet. Only a matter of time. I think that's in part because there was no pictures of her face. And there's degrees of separation. I'm even very careful. Some of my cousins want the listing. They think it's kind of cool to be my family, but I'm very careful about who I list as my family, because I know trolls do that and they dig into your life, and I don't even consider that trolling. That is actually harassment. When you dig into someone's life and go after their family members, that goes beyond trolling, and that goes into harassment, and we should know better at this point. But, the moral of the story is involve your family in your writing with caution. And, I get it from the other side as well. People blame me for the evolutions in my husband's character, which I find kind of like, what? This is some weird inversion going on here. Like, why do they think that somebody who does a character as caustic as Ed the Sock is going to be swayed by anyone? Least of all his family. Pro tip from someone who's been married, a long time, almost 2 decades. The last person someone listens to is their spouse on what they should or should not do. And that just, that's just, I'm joking to an extent, but that is nuttiness. But it happens. People want to blame the wife for stuff because it's the Yoko Ono thing, right? It's Yoko syndrome that, if because they do it to Howard Stern as well. They blame his wife Beth for the fact that he's grown the fuck up. And, he'll still go on at length asking Idina Menzel about her sexual practices when she's singing at a Billy Joel special. He's still stern. But the natural evolution of somebody who's been in the media for decades, it does change. The fact that people blame the spouse for any evolution, it's foolish. It's foolish. It's just not the way it works. And because of that, because I have experienced, I would caution against anybody, including their children, in their work in this way. Because she's putting her real name on this. People know who her sons are. And they confronted her sons with, and I love how they use an archive of the Washington Post on her own article. The fuck? But it's called My Teen Boys Are Blind to Rape Culture. She wrote this. And she actually quoted stuff that her son said. Oh, come on, go back. Don't leave me stuck on this. Okay. She actually quoted stuff her son said around the dinner table. Now, that is a violation, okay? What happens in safe space should stay in safe space if you believe in safe spaces. What Jodi Allard did to her sons was wrong. They are, in one case, the kids were 16 and 18. The 18-year-old is ostensibly an adult. Give me a break. No. 18 is an arbitrary number, especially in this day and age. It's a throwback to a time where adulthood was not this complex. But her kids are 16 and 18. She should not be putting dumb stuff they said being teenagers around the dining room table on the Washington Post for the world to pick apart. What was she thinking? One of my sons was hurt by my words, although he's never told me so. Then how do you know he was hurt? He doesn't understand why I lumped him and his brother together in my essay. I don't either, Jodi. He sees himself as the good one, the one who is sensitive and thoughtful, who listens instead of reacts. Well, he should get credit for that. He doesn't understand that even quiet misogyny is misogyny, and that not all sexists sound like Twitter trolls. Kids, I feel for you more and more. He is angry at me now, although he won't admit that either, and his anger led him to conservative websites and YouTube channels, places he can surround himself with righteous indignation against feminists and tell himself it's ungrateful women like me who are the problem. Well, yes, because you're his mom, and you made him feel like he was inherently evil. Duh! You embarrassed him in the Washington Post so you could get paid and earn feminist points. Like, yeah, it's ungrateful women like you who are the problem. You are not treating your family as your first and foremost responsibility. And I'm not saying that because she's a woman. I'm saying that because parents of all genders should treat the sanctity of their family, the sanctity of their relationship with their children as primary. You do not throw your kids to the slaughter that way. It doesn't matter if you're a man and a woman. That's wrong. But when I confront him with his own sexism, I question whether I'm pushing too hard and leaving him without an emotional safe space in his home. It's beyond that. You left him without an emotional safe space anywhere. You put him in a headline in the Washington Post. You turned your son into a non-consenting source. He told you something off the record, and you put it on paper attributed to him. That's just a journalistic mistake. He wasn't on the record. He had no intention of making that a public thing. We all know people say things when they think they can trust you. Part of the big thing about gender relations is people have to be able to go out with it and say something like that and be able to be listened to and a back and forth so they can learn something without feeling like they're going to suffer a public shaming. Like, this reads as if the mother is the teenager. And that's very telling, because one thing we know about trauma is that people get stuck emotionally at the age the trauma occurred. And so we're putting this person emotionally around 16 years old. And then it's men. There's really not a lot of self-reflection here until this critical point. And this is the paragraph that I think is the core. And this is why I think there's value to this piece, even though it's not written with any sort of value. I do not want to prove my pain or provide enough evidence to convince anyone that my trauma is merited. I'm through wasting time on people who are more interested in ideas than feelings, and I'm through pretending these men are safe. You're kids. But that I do not want to prove my pain or provide enough evidence to convince anyone that my trauma is merited. That's the gold in this. And you guys know, PTSD graduate right here. Okay. This is what trauma does to someone. This article is what happens when someone is not given appropriate therapy to actually overcome trauma. This is a snapshot into the type of woman this articles like this create. Someone who is constantly in a bubble of self-re-traumatization. Instead of going, I am accountable for my actions. I have an internal locus of control. I can control what happens to me. I have agency. This woman is seeing the world through trauma. And trauma inherently disconnects your sense of control over your own life and is so out of control. She is blaming her own sons for her predicament. She is inverting the parent-child paradigm because she is stuck. And this is precisely what I did not want to be, which is why I went through some intensely grueling therapy and wrote numerous articles and used gaming as a roadmap. Kratos was my roadmap out of trauma. And it was so interesting to talk to David Jaffe and have him say, PTSD was absolutely not in our minds when we did God of War, but the Greek and Roman myths are so infused by stories of guys coming back from wars effed up that it ended up in there. And if you think about it, the entire game of God of War, not intended, this is my interpretation, this is what helped me, is a metaphor for a guy overcoming trauma and guilt and screwing up a lot along the way. The same way Kratos is slaughtering innocents and killing gods and being a one-person wrecking machine, a one-person destructive force. It's not that different than a woman who hangs her own kids out to dry in the Washington Post. That is a destructive act. That is ripping off Eros's head and using him as a lantern. Okay, you are using other people as an object for you to get something that you want. And that is what trauma does. And we like to create this myth about trauma where we're all these whimpering, quivering, curled up in a corner. Oh God, my life will never be the same. Someone help me. But that's not what it really looks like. It looks like military veterans punching walls and people writing crap like this. And then you come into how responsible is someone when they write someone like this, something like this, and what do we do about it? Because someone who hangs their kids out to dry, we can all sort of recognize that that is irresponsible. You know, this isn't misogynist. The guy who did that David at the dentist video, a lot of people said, you know, that's going to be on the internet forever, and your kid did not consent for you doing them. We have parental consent. The 16-year-old, he is still at the mercy of his mother. His 18-year-old, the 18-year-old actually has some agency under the law to say, I did not give you permission to use me in that way. He is an adult under the eyes of the law. She can't do that anymore. And what's amazing about this article is that it is a snapshot of a person who is clearly very smart, but they are stunted because they're in the throes of trauma. And then, you know, you see the ending and you see the fear coming through again. I don't know what the balance is between supporting these men and educating them, but I know the toil it takes on me to try. Well, you don't know what balance is. No, because you're traumatized. You're in the middle of it. You don't know up from down. You don't know left from right. You have no balance. That's trauma. Take some time and understand your own trauma and what that means. I am too valuable and too worthy to waste my time on men who are not my flesh and blood. Anybody who has to put that in an article is trying to convince themselves. Trust me. I write shit like that in my own writing and I delete it because I know what that is. And I go, do I mean this or am I trying to convince myself? Either way, it gotta go. But as my boys grow into men, I wonder whether I've done enough to combat the messages they hear from anyone but me. Well, that's not seeing your kids as self-actualized people. That's trying to control the people around you. And that's part of trauma. You feel so unsafe that you think you have to program your children instead of parenting your children. And this is when I get into the, do you have children? Think, no, but I've spent a career programming for youth. So guess what? My message through mass media to your kids is just as powerful, if not more powerful than yours. So I have taken time to be responsible in those messages and not just try to combat the messages they hear from everyone but me. I want to encourage critical thinking. I don't want people to just parrot what they hear me say. And they are good boys. Great. After all this, they're good boys. And maybe that's the best they can be in the system we've created for them. Yes, that's all anybody can be. And why is this not enough? You know, you'll notice this is not a reflection of something broken or damaged in me. It is a reflection of the systems we build and our boys absorb. That is denial. Okay, that is absolute denial. Your kids are 16 and 18 years old. That is precisely the age to go back through the, there we go. That is precisely the age of that, oh, not rape culture again. There's no such thing as rape culture. You say everything is about rape culture or sexism. That's the dinner table conversation that is the same as us hating Neil Diamond as a kid because my mother played Neil Diamond nonstop. I got so sick of freaking Cracklin' Rose. Okay? Now I like the song because it wasn't forced on me. And she had one Harry Chapman album, and I would play that. And she thought it was violent because I really like the song The Rock. But there's some shit in these kids' heads. They're 16 years old. This mother is putting way too much pressure on her kids because she's sorting out her own damage. And this is something I was doing when you're trying to make the screaming in your head stop. You go out of your way to try to control your circumstances because you feel intensely out of control. You want to control the actions of the people around you because that gives you the false perception of safety. It gives you temporary stability. It is a band-aid instead of a solution. Well, what happens to band-aids? After a couple days, they get dirty and they fall off, right? So instead of band-aiding, you actually have to heal the wound. You actually have to get to the point where your insides heal to the point that you don't have to keep reapplying that band-aid. Because trying to turn your sons into perfect feminists is the band-aid. It's impossible. That is going to get dirty and fall off. You cannot expect perfection from any human being, certainly not a 16-year-old or an 18-year-old. She is expecting way, way too much from kids of that age. I give them credit, and this is a testament to some of her parenting. They are telling her to stuff it, which if they were really terrified of their mother, they wouldn't. So I'll give her that. But instead of seeing, oh, wow, I've raised kids who think for themselves. I don't like some of the thinking they're doing right now, but they're not parroting me and they're not just telling me what they want to hear. They are actualized enough that they are rebelling, and that's a good thing. Now, they're right at the age that most people associate with gamers, even though that's a myth, it's not true. But we know that, and this is why that one story about gamers, around the age of 15, boys go through this stage of development where they have trouble connecting to their emotions. Not all boys, but, just like not all girls turn into catty so-and-sos too. Because girls at that age, perception is reality. I keep warning, because I've studied this stuff and I've read the books, I keep warning friends of mine with girls who are like 11 or 12 years old, perception is about to become reality with your daughter. It's not your fault. It's normal. Just ride it out. She's not any more insane than any other teenager. And with boys, instead of it being this overwhelming fountain of emotion, the only thing they can seem to project is aggression. It's a developmental stage. It's not right, it's not wrong, it's not good, it's not bad, but it is normal. And again, like I did in the first place, let's not hinge too much on why. Let's just say that it is so, and what are we going to do about it? Well, if it's normal, we don't have to lose it. Your sons are 16 and 18 years old. They will grow. They will evolve. Be happy that your kid is not at the height of their development at the age of 16. And there's a big difference between 16 and 18, so I can understand the one son not wanting to lump things in with the other. And you can't punish your kid for the culture. The very thing that she is afraid of is just a fact. We are all a product of the culture in which we are raised. I have a radically different view of certain topics because I was raised in a very multicultural environment without a lot of money than someone who grows up in a monocultural environment but rich. There's no better or worse in that. And that's why I talk about mosaic feminism instead of intersectional feminism, because this article is an intersectionally feminist approach. She is looking through the pinhole of her own experience and saying, this is the world. And under intersectionalism, we have to say, okay, your approach is valid. And it is a close read. At this moment, we listen and believe. We accept your truth. That is intersectionalism. And then people go, well, check your white privilege, lady, and your blah, 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 and we do all that. Whereas I go, no, you're a tile in the wall. This is your experience. This is what you feel. At least you're not trying to intelligentsia it the way this thing did and bring up all these quotes and facts and misleading things to try to prove the rightness of your cause. At least Jodi Allard had the guts to say controversial things Like I'm through wasting my time on people who are more interested in ideas than feelings. Like, you would think that that should be inverted in a person who writes for the Washington Post, right? But like I said, I think that the most telling thing in this article is I do not want to prove my pain or provide enough evidence to convince anyone that my trauma is merited. And yet, she spends article after article after article trying to prove her pain. And that is the cycle of trauma. That is a person being stuck in their own personal hell. And I'm telling you this because I lived through it. And the only way through it is through it. You have to look that thing you're afraid of. Okay, nobody's going to believe you. I had to live that. I had something happen. I know it happened. Even the police didn't believe me. And I have talked to other people, male and female, who have gone through that exact same thing. And you have a choice in that. Is this going to beat you? Are you going to spend your entire life trying to get a victory from that? Trying to get someone to believe you? Or are you going to go, I don't need validation from anyone else. I don't need anyone else to tell me this happened. This happened and the world is not going to help me deal with it. Now what? What ended up happening is when I went into the police, before I got told that if the person stalking me came up to me in a crowded room and punched me in the face, that would be great. Actual quote from a police sergeant where, you know, my friends who are cops hear that and go, oh, you drew a bad cop. That's what they said. Before that, I was given a pamphlet by the very nice uniformed officer that came to my house to take my statement. And it was a pamphlet for victim services. And I called them. And call them before you go in. Because what happened is I met my crisis worker before I went in to give the report. And they say, do this, don't do this, stick to your story. But she was there. She couldn't go in with me. But she waited. She was there before and she was there after. And so she could tell me, you did everything you could do. And so I'm not left asking the way Jody Allard is, have I done everything I could? And then began the slow process of getting the feeling of control back. And that involved writing my MP and getting nowhere but added to a mailing list of an MP that didn't help me. Oh, we're going to send you a letter to tell you how very hard it is to change legislation. But that's because my case didn't hit the headlines. When a case hits the headlines, then, all of a sudden we get this flurry of activity driven by emotion instead of good sense. Because there's political capital to that, instead of actually trying to help a constituent who happens to not have harnessed the power of the media because they didn't have famous friends with access to the press to begin with. But I had to do that to say I did it, to say I did everything I could. And then it was a question of small steps to regain control. This makes me feel out of control. Well, I'm going to stop doing it. This ongoing interaction with this particular group of people feels wrong to me. I feel like my boundaries are perpetually being violated. Well, we have to leave that company. We have to leave that website. We have to leave this association. This sounds like terror to a lot of people. The idea that you actually have to cut through, Kratos, cut through, slay everyone who put you in the situation that made you traumatized to make you feel shame and guilt and like you were the problem. You have to slay every single, metaphorically, person that is between you and a sense of closure. If they are not with you on your journey, get out of the way. And that's what God of War did for me. It gave me that metaphor. Sorry, Aries. Sorry, Athena. Sorry, Zeus. So, you are in my way. Does that make me a very likable person? Nope. Does that make me a resilient person? Oh, hell yeah. And once you train yourself into making those choices that are good for you, it's amazing how much less control you need over the people around you. Now, control and boundaries are different things. If you're saying to someone, what you're doing has a negative effect on me, can we figure something out? And they don't seem the least bit interested in talking to you, that's one of the gods that Kratos has to knock out, right? These sound very subjective because they are. And this is why you have to try it and do it and try it and do it and feel your way through and dope around and feel sure that you are doing everything you can instead of constantly questioning whether you're doing everything you can. Have you done enough? Well, if you have done everything you could, then yes, you have done enough. And this has informed my perspective on women in gaming, feminism in general, men's issues, women's issues, the whole Gamergate thing. I don't have to second guess the way I handled Gamergate. Despite all the shunning, despite the horrible things people said to me and did to me and tried to do to me, I know I did all I could. I know what I saw. I know what I witnessed. I know what I reported on. I did some good reporting. And I know that when I became compromised, I backed away. I know I stayed ethical. I know I stayed true to my principles. And someone coming around and saying, no, you didn't, may rattle me a little bit. But 3 days later, I won't constantly be going, did I? Oh my God. Because I know I did all I could. It's not popular. It hasn't been particularly good for my bottom line. But I told the truth. And I continue to tell the truth. And just like those cops didn't believe me back in the day, the mainstream gaming press doesn't believe me regarding Gamergate. And I'm still here, and I'm still talking, and I still have a generosity of spirit and a compassion and empathy for other people that I did not allow others to take from me, because I pushed through my trauma to the other side instead of spinning around and blaming a whole bunch of other people and not doing anything about it. And so as much as this article may bother you, as much as this article may trigger you, there is something to learn from it, because it's an op-ed that isn't telling any story but her own. And so I think this is much more honest, even though it's somewhat clueless. It's a work in progress, okay? Compared to this, which is just intellectually dishonest. Hopefully the distinction makes sense. That's it for me. Happy Friday.